الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على ختم الأنبياء وسيد المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحابته أجمعين. اللهم افتح علينا فتوح العارفين ووفقنا توفيق الصالحين وانفعنا اللهم بالقرآن وذكر الحكيم. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما وعملا متقبلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. أصبحنا وأصبح الملك لله رب العالمين. اللهم إنا نسألك خير هذا اليوم فتحه ونصره ونوره وبركته وهداه، ونعوذ بك من شره وشر ما فيه وشر ما قبله وشر ما بعده، ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Alhamdulillah, it's good to be back and hope that all of you had a pleasant Eid holiday and break from study. And hope you've been missing this as well at the same time. So we return today to continue this particular course, which has been entitled The Roots of Interpretative Disagreements. And the title of the course, it follows the theme of verses 118, 119 from Surah Hud, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it says, after أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ولو شاء ربك لجعل الناس أمة واحدة ولا يزالون مختلفين إلا من رحم ربك ولذلك خلقهم. That if Allah had so willed, He would have made humanity a single community. However, they will continue to be at difference with one another or at variance with one another, except for those to whom Allah shows His mercy, and for that reason He has created them. Now, this particular course is the study of a poem, a versified didactic poem, which was based upon the original work of Imam Al-Haramain Al-Juwayni, rahmatullah alayh, entitled Al-Waraqat. And this particular poem, as we know, has been authored by an Egyptian scholar for some centuries later, Sheikh Al-Amriti, entitled Tasheel Turaqat bi Nazm Al-Waraqat. And up to this point, we have come to begin to discuss the details pertaining to this particular science, which traditionally has been called usul al-fiqh, Islamic, or the roots or the foundations of Islamic jurisprudence, among other names that have been given to this particular topic. And in this particular science, there are three, or we would say two, pivotal areas of discussion. One is this discussion of the issue of the sources of Islam, the Islamic teachings. And then second relates to the interpretation of the verses, the hadith, and other aspects of the sources. So we spend a lot of time in this particular science, first and foremost speaking about what is it that makes certain sources authoritative, what makes them the true standard for epistemology, or the sources of truth or ultimate truth. And then when we, as we read it, naturally we're going to come across some expressions which are, some are univocal, others are polyvocal. And when they're polyvocal in particular, this is where we most of the time would find the most disagreement in this particular regard. Now, as I mentioned before, speech itself, according to the linguists, is something different than what speech is according to grammarians. And the grammarians, they mentioned that speech has to be something which is articulated, something which has sound and letter, something which can be communicated to the other in very clear fashion without ambiguity. Whereas linguists say anything that can be communicate a meaning or an understanding itself, although it may have a lot more ambiguity. So even gestures, among other things, is considered to be speech according to linguists. But we're dealing with the definition, which is fundamentally the definition of the grammarians, because the Quran is a book which was revealed to humanity by Allah SWT. And so while we're trying to gain a deeper understanding of this text and the Islamic teachings, we are doing it according to conventions, which are understood as being accepted or agreed upon types of convention in some regards. Words have meanings in their context. In the Quran, the words have meanings according to those contexts. Certain expressions have meanings according to particular context. But in sometimes it is difficult for us to know exactly what is the proper context of those particular words. So Imam al-Juwayni, one of the things he says is that when he talks about the different parts of speech or the different types of expression as opposed to parts of speech. The parts of speech are three, nouns, verbs, and particles, but the types of expressions are one, or the types of statements we can say, or one, a declarative statement when you're fundamentally describing or attributing characteristics to the subject of that particular sentence, and we call this jumla ismiya, right, or jumla khabariya, depending on if you're dealing with grammar or rhetoric. And then you have what we call the imperative, or so one is descriptive, declarative. The other is prescriptive, a prescriptive type of statement, which in Arabic we call talab. Falls in the category of talab. So there's sort of a request being made. It's not describing anything. Sit up, sit down, drink, eat, go out, come in. Those are type of expressions as well, and each type of expression has its presumptive ruling that is attached with it. So descriptive expressions are, taken presumptively as things that are simply describing the state of something, or emphasizing the quality in something, or attributing the quality to a particular thing, which may or may not be true. Whereas the prescriptive declarations are those which are simply calling for people to respond in particular ways. Do this, don't do that. We call it amr. When we say do it, call it an amr, an imperative or command. Don't do it, we call it an nahi, prohibition. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with regard to our response to the Creator's words, we are more concerned in this particular science about the commandments. What does He expect from us to do? Because when we read the Quran, then there are certain expressions, or let's say that everything in the Quran is expecting or demanding a particular type of response from us. Anything that we read in the Quran, it demands from us a particular response. Some responses is for us of taslim, or just simply accepting or surrendering that Allah knows best, right? Like, so in the Quran, Allah, He begins certain surahs, Hamim, Alif Lam Mim, Ra, Alif Lam Ra, Noon, Qaf. Throughout the Quran, we find these letters, and we really don't know exactly what is meant by them, but we do believe, or are expected to believe, that Allah meant something by them, right? Now the response is, hey, whatever you meant by that, I believe it, I accept it, right? And so that's one response to certain types of verses. Some verses, they expect from us to accept their import, to adapt their what they're suggesting. So belief, we're expected to believe in the angels or the books or things like that. But then there are other verses that are expecting for us to comply with the commandment, to do something. Right? So if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to do something, then we have to search for some degree of clarity. And so fundamentally what's happened in this particular science of usul al-fiqh, after the time of the Messenger alayhi salatu wasalam, after the time of the period of revelation, what fundamentally is happening is that scholars have come to say, well, we still have to understand these things in a certain way, but we cannot base our understanding we have a certain code of conduct or morality that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala expects from us to act upon or act in accord with, but we cannot determine what that morality will be independent of the sources of Islam, independent of revelation. So what they say, instead of us just trying to adopt a purely rational sort of foundation or basis for determining morality, and say, well, because if we did that, then realistically we would fundamentally be acquiescing to the idea that Islam has nothing to say about this. Islam has nothing to contribute to the morality more than what we already know, right? Yeah. So rather say, no, we have to incorporate both the rational and the revelatory into that process, you see. So the revelation is what it is. It has ambiguous statements in it. And so we use rational or reason in order to interpret those particular things. So commandments, prohibitions, sometimes the command can be taken as presumptive judgment, is that, or the presumptive expectation of a command is that the action we're being ordered is that it is compulsory for us to carry it out. And the way that we determine that is based on the context. We look at the commander and the one being commanded. So if the one being commanded, one commanding is of a higher authority than the one who is being commanded, then we assume that the order is compulsory for us to carry out, to fulfill, until there's evidence to evidence otherwise. Right? And so that's important. Same thing with prohibition. Prohibition coming from one of a higher authority to one of a lower authority, then we're to understand that that particular prohibition is intended to mean that if we were to act when we are told not to act, then we'll be sinful in acting, right? In contradistinction to the prohibition, you see. Now, but when people of equal a status, then there's a different story altogether, right? So, for instance, there's not a relationship of hierarchy, but a relationship of equality. Then definitely right there, we don't make assumption that the order should be taken as binding on us to comply with. You know, so context is extremely important. And so after dealing with, again, prescriptive statements, he then moves in to deal with the most fundamental type of descriptive words or expressions or declarations. We call al-am. Bab al-am, generalizations, the general statements, general expressions. And this is extremely important for us, especially today, this idea of generalization. In light of the very fact that a lot of overgeneralizations being made, especially about the Muslim community, but this is nothing new in history, that people have always made overgeneralizations about other people and about other things. And generalizations occur on two different levels. One, the first is a generalization which occurs on the level of definition. Like, so for instance, if I say you are a human being, right? That in itself is a generalization because human being has a definition, and there's someone somewhere defined or gave the definition for what a human being was. And in giving that definition, they tried to isolate those particular characteristics which are fundamental to humanness, right? So this is like typically we'll find, at least from the Greek tradition and throughout most of our history up until, of course, the modern period, and especially during the postmodern period where things have changed in this particular regard with regard to the definition of the human being, that you'll find that a basic definition of the human being is the rational animal or the articulate animal. So we say articulate animal means rational animal because in order to articulate, meaning that I'm trying to convey words to you, fundamentally means that I thought before I did that. You know, so I'm the rational animal itself. You know, so now saying that that is the definition of a human being is not necessarily meant as a way to express the entirety or the complete reality of what a person is, right? And words themselves never can completely express everything that something is, right? They're a symbol, right? Words are symbols for certain realities. The realities precede their names and designations. Realities precede their designations, right? And so at times when we're trying to define things, we may make an error when we may think something to be an essential characteristic, which actually is not an essential characteristic. So saying that the human being is an articulate or rational animal, does that mean that the human being is not a laughing, crying animal, right? Does it mean that the human being is, you understand? So it's not, it's meant to try to gather, the process of definition is meant to try to gather all those things which would be considered essential to the existence of the thing it is being designated, which is being given this particular designation. And so calling you the human being, right, again, is a generalization. So on this level, we have a lot of people who would say, okay, well, we should get away from generalizations. You should always qualify. You shouldn't be essentializing people. This is sort of like a universal category, right? Right? Because you can't just essentialize people. On this level, realistically, to say that in itself is somewhat contradictory, because if you say that we should not essentialize people, then the word people is fundamentally a universal that we're acknowledging. So we're acknowledging a universal on one level, and another level we're not acknowledging a universal, right? So, but a misdefinition, the problem is not so much with universals, the problem is with misdefinitions or the value judgments that come on the second level. So the first level of generalization relates to the actual individual word itself, a word which is considered to be something that combines more than two or more entities, right, under the same rubric or category, right? We call it an or general. But then there's a second level of generalization, and this second level of generalization pertains to the actual ascription of a characteristic to either the genus itself, the actual category, the overall category, or a particular thing in the category. So, for instance, human being, if we place that at the level of the genus, and then the species will be, for instance, man, woman. If we place that on that level, and of course, some may disagree with how I sort of divide this, but anyway, it doesn't really matter. Somebody made this up sometime in the past anyway. Even if, whatever, you understand, it's convention. Islam mushahhata fi istilah. People can, make up their own conventions, and as long as they understand what's meant by them in their context, then it's fine. But human being divides into man, woman, right? Now that level is fine, man, woman. But once we enter into the second level of generalization, when I say man is better than woman, so that is a second level of generalization. And this is fundamentally what most people are usually objecting to. They're not often objecting to it on the first level, but on the second level of generalization. Why? Because if I say man or men are better than women, that means every single man is better than every single woman. And it doesn't even specify in what characteristic. It just says it doesn't matter. Everything. All men are better than all women in everything, right? And so this is fun, on the level in logic. We saw this is the level of tasdeeq as opposed to the level of tasawwur, of this sort of simple apprehension, which is the first level. And the second level is really where most of the controversy begins. It begins on that level when we start to attribute certain things to others which may or may not be true, right? So Muslims are terrorists, right? Meaning every single Muslim is a terrorist, right? So it's not Muslim. See, if we start on the level of Muslim, again, on the level of this simple apprehension on the mufrad, on that level, then what is a Muslim? How do we define a Muslim? Now, Muslims define Muslims in different ways. Like, I might consider one of you a Muslim, and another person I might not consider to be a Muslim for whatever reason, because of creedal differences, you see. All right? But non-Muslims as well, they have to make a decision as well about what they're defining. And they have made a decision about. So their definition of Muslim may not be, or often is not, the same definition that most of us may give to a Muslim. That for them, they're not making the distinction between, Shi'i or Sunni, right, or Ismaili or Ibadi. Right? They're not making that distinction, or often they're not even making a theological distinction. They may just say, hey, you say you're Muslim, you're a Muslim, right? It's because it really can they really? So we deal with it in their context. That's what they're doing. So we can challenge the definition, and this is what sometimes Muslims would do, is that because of their outrage at the overgeneralization on the second level with regard to the value judgment, that we'll question the definition. But what we'll do is that, okay, well, violent Muslims or violent people are not Muslims. We'll do a takfir, right? He's like, well, the definition. Oh, they're not Muslims. Why? Because they're violent. So that means they're not Muslim. Become like Khawarij, like pseudo Khawarij type of people. So just because we don't want someone to be placed in the same category as ourselves, we'll just simply object to the definition, you see, as opposed to focusing on the second level, which is really where the real problem exists, is overgeneralizations on that level, right? All men are better than women, or Muslims are terrorists, right? And so realistically, the problem is not that it's a generalization. The problem is fundamentally is that it's a lie, right? You understand? That is a lie, because because fundamentally saying all of them are like this is a lie, right? Some of them, yes, but all of them, no, right? And so, and this is important for Muslims to understand, because we have to make sure that we don't get caught up into the fray and we are sort of led to accept a lot of tropes and a lot of assumptions which haven't necessarily been questioned or tested, and to the extent that when we now approach the Quran, now if I accept that there's a problem with generalizations, especially if they're overgeneralizations, what happens when I open up the Quran? When I find generalizations, and I find that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the creator, utilized generalizations in the Quran, do I say the Quran's not from Allah because he used an overgeneralization? Right? Or do I understand that when he made a generalization, he meant something specific about it, right? Or sometimes he really meant it in its literal sense, right? Now you have three types of generalizations, and so I'm going to say this before we start to read the text, and I think it will help us to grasp what's going to be mentioned in the text. You have three types of generalizations. You have a true generalization, which means that it's literal. It's meant exactly. It means everybody, right? So if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, "Inna lil-muttaqina mafaza," indeed for the righteous is a reward, for lack of a better translation. The righteous receive a reward. God-conscious people receive a reward. Inna Allaha yuhibbul muhsinin. Allah loves the good doers. Right? This is a generalization, right? Is it true or false? You understand? Can you think of an exception? It's a general. Allah loves good doers. It's a generalization. Is to be taken literally. Right? Mathalu jannati allati wu'ida al-muttaqun. The similitude of the garden that the muttaqun, the God-conscious, have been promised. Right. So the God-conscious meaning all of them. Everybody who's God-conscious, every person is a good doer of good. That it is literal. This is taken literally. Right. That there's no exception to it. Right. But you just have to fight to become or work to become among that category of people. Right. So you have that level, a true generalization. Then you have a figurative generalization. And this is to say that a general expression is utilized, but realistically a specific group of people are meant. So true, figurative. So an example of this is like in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions الَّذِينَ قَالَ لَهُمُ النَّاسُ إِنَّ النَّاسَ قَدْ جَمَعُوا لَكُمْ. And those to whom the people said to them, the people have gathered against you. فَخْشَوْهُمْ, so fear them. Right? So those, right, who said, as to those who said, the people have gathered against you. Those of whom the people have said, the people have gathered against you. So first, it says that the ones who were communicating the message were the people. The people said, right, that the people are gathering against you. So fear them. Right? So does this mean that all the people told them that? It means some of the people told them that. Right? And the same thing, the people are gathering against them. Are all the people gathering against them? No. Some of the people are gathering against them. Right? So you have your true generalization, you have your figurative or metaphorical generalization, and then you have, so it first we call al-am al-murad bihi al-am, and then al-am al-murad bihi al-khas, and then you have your exclusionary generalization, al-am al-mukhassas, or al-am alladhi dakhalahu khusus. That is, say, your general statement where a particular has been excluded from the category. Certain people have been excluded from the category. So, for instance, there's an argument amongst the theologians and the exegetes about the category of mushrik, idolater. Are the people of the book, Ahlul Kitab, the Jews and the Christian, included in that category or not? So the mushrik is a person who worships idols, right? Or an idolater, right? So some scholars say it's am in the Christians, and the Christians in particular, they definitely fall in that category. Others say no, it is an am, right? And so because they actually don't literally bow down to the idols like the mushrikun, right? But I mean, for those who say that they do fall in that category, that the ruling applying to the permissibility of marriage and eating from their food, that they're excluded from the category of the mushrikun, right? And so for instance, so Muslim men will be allowed to marry Christian and Jewish women, right? Because even though the Quran says, وَلَا تَنْكِحُ الْمُشْرِكَاتِ حَتَّى يُؤْمِنْ, do not marry idolaters or women who are idolaters until they believe, right? But the Quran makes it allowable for Muslim men to marry Christian women, right, or Jewish women, right? So for that opinion that said that this is a general statement and applies also to the Christians and the Jews, there's an exception. They're excluded from the general category. Others say, well, no, that the mushrik are their own category and the Ahlul Kitab are their own category altogether. So they wouldn't be falling under that particular category. So you have the true generalization, you have the figurative, and then you have the exclusionary generalization. And so hopefully that would give us some clarity as we read through the rest of this. So Imam Amriti, he says about the issue of generalization or the general statements in the Quran or in the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. He said, وَحَدُّهُ لَفْظٌ يَعُمُّ أَكْثَرَ مِنْ وَاحِدٍ مِنْ غَيْرِ مَا حَصْرًا يُرَى. Its definition is a word that embraces more than one without any visible restriction. So this is page 21 from the translation, Dr. Hassam's translation. Its definition is a word that embraces more than one without any visible restriction. So an am, a general statement, a general expression is one, or a general word, right? It's one that includes, it's a universal category. A universal category. It places underneath it all the particulars of that category. من قولهم عممتهم بما معي ولا تنحصر ألفاظه في أربع. It is from their saying, or I mean, an example of this is like when they say, I covered them with what I have. عممتهم بما معي. Right. So عممت, we use the word am in Arabic. عممتهم. So if someone says that, it means that I've covered them with all I've had, meaning I've given them from, right? I've given all of them from what I have. And words of this type are limited to 4. So basically, in the Arabic language, it's saying that. So if you want to know if an expression is indicative of generality, then you know that there are only 4 types of expression in the Arabic language where that occurs. And he says, وَالْجَمْعُ مَرْفَرْضُ مُعَرَّفَانِ بِاللَّامِ كَالْكَافِرِ وَالْإِنسَانِ. The plural. So the first type is the plural. The singular is the second type. Both of them made definite by alif lam. Like al-kafir, the unbeliever, and al-insan, the human. So basically, and as Sheikh Abdul-Rahmaan al-Sa'di mentions in his manzuma, he says, وَأَلْ تُفِيدُ كُلَّ فِي الْعُمُومِ فِي الْجَمْعِ وَإِفْرَادِ كَالْعَلِيمِ. So al, the definite article alif lam, it is indicative, or it refers to the totality or all of something when it is utilized as a generalization, both in the singular and both in the plural or the singular state, like the word Al-Halim. And so it gives this example in that particular text. It's not from this text, from a different poem. Al-Halim, in that particular example, is somewhat different than the examples given here, because that Al-Halim is a reference to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which means the knowing or the knower. And so basically what that particular author is implying is that if you find the name of Allah, one of his names, As-Sami' Al-Basir Al-Alim, that fundamentally it means Alimu kulli shay. It means the one who has knowledge of everything. Right? However, we want to begin with something a bit more simplistic. So Imam Juwayni and also Sheikh Amrithi, they begin with these more basic ideas, of basic words. So a singular word like insan, human being, person, right? Wal asr, innal insana lafi khusr, right? By time, I swear by time, verily, the human being, or verily man is in loss, is at a loss. So here, al-insan is in the singular case, but it doesn't mean, it's not that man that we know, the familiar, the ma'hud, alif lam al-ma'hud. Right. Inshallah, I'll come to the question once I finish the verses. Inshallah, I'll come to the questions. So like the an insan, man or human being or person, is not taken to be like someone who we're familiar with. He's like, oh yeah, that person over there. When Allah says, "Inna al-insana lafi khusr," verily the man, verily the person is at a loss, or is in ruin. Right? That particular, no, it means the category of person. The category of person is, it means mankind itself. So even though it's mentioned as a singular form, it is taken what we call istighraq al-jins. It's a genus. It's a category of entity. And the same thing al-kafir as well. So the kafir, another example of that. If we mention al-kafir in the Quran, in the singular case, they say here, it doesn't just mean a particular kafir, it means the general category of kafir in most cases, unbeliever. وَكُلُّ مُبْهَمٍ مِنَ الْإِسْمَاءِ مِنْ ذَاكَ مَا لِشَرْطِ مِنْ جَزَاءِ. Right, so the noun that is preceded by the definite article, the, right, alif lam, be it singular or plural. So for instance, an example of the plural form, which you didn't mention to give an example of, is like in the Quran, one of the controversial verses, فَقْتُلُوا الْمُشْرِكِينَ, kill, right, the idolaters, right? Controversial verse, kill the idolaters. Now, if we say this is a true generalization, it means kill every single idolater that is alive, right, without exception, right? But since we know that is not referring to every single idolater, right? And also, it is a reference to certain idolaters who lived during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and there are all these conditions, who violated certain oaths, and they attacked the Muslims in the masjid, and things like that. So here, if we were to say it's a true then it would mean every single one of them. So if we understand how the umum works, generalizations work, then we're not left in that uneasy type of place, because everything is in context. You look at the verses that came before, the verses came after, it becomes very clear. Right? Because if we're supposed to kill all of the idolaters, Allah later on wouldn't say, وَإِنْ أَحَدٌ مِّنَ الْمُشْرِكِينَ اسْتَجَارَكَ فَأَجِرْهُ حَتَّى يَسْمَعَ كَلَامَ اللَّهِ. It said, ثُمَّ أَبْلِغْهُ مَأْمَنَهُ. That if one of the idolaters seeks asylum with you, seeks refuge with you, then grant him asylum, so that in order for him to hear the word of God, and then take him to his place of asylum, right? So if this is like, it begins this, the verse about killing them was before that, right? So it doesn't make sense to think, okay, well, I'm supposed to kill all of them, right? No, it's a reference to, and also the command was not for obligation either. See, that's the other part of it as well, because we understand where commands work. Commands not all mean obligation. Some could be recommendation. Some could be authorization, just general permissibility, right? That can mean, they can have all these different possibilities. And so when we understand the way the expressions work, then we're not left in an uneasy type of situation. So those are the first two. Then he says, and every form of indefinite noun, or every form of obscure noun. That's the way I would translate mubham. Mubham is obscure noun. So in every form of indefinite noun, including the conditional, the conditional ma, the word ma, which it can mean what or that which, whatever. It could take on a number of different meanings. That serves as apodosis of the conditional, meaning that it is, right, the ma taf'al tujza bihi. So it is apodosis. I mean, like, it is the thing that is made conditional for something else, right? So sometimes the word ma, the harf, or that particle, what or whatever, is taken as generalization, right? So it's a form of obscure noun. Ma, whatever. Whatever you do, you'll be rewarded for, right? Whatever. So it's general. I mean, if I drink a cup of water, if I wave my hand in the air, right? Yeah, you'll be, you understand? So whatever is an obscure noun because it includes so many different things, without exception. So those are examples of terms that are general as well. وَلَفْظُ مَنْ فِي عَاقِلٍ وَلَفْظُ مَا فِي غَارِهِ وَلَفْظُ أَيٍّ فِيهِمَا. And also include amongst the obscure nouns or particles, and the word man, who, or I say whoever. So whoever, so whatever, whoever hits my mother deserves to go to jail, right? You understand? So whoever, be a man, woman, child, adult, right? A human, non-human, right? It's general, it's am, but it's an obscure type of particle. And the word man, who, in the case of rational beings, so whenever it's a reference to rational beings, so human beings, uqala, and the word ma, and the word ma, what, and I don't have my glasses, that's why I'm pausing here, I'm sorry. And the word ma, what, in that of irrational beings, and ayu, which or whichever, relating to either category, right? So he's giving us the examples. You have ma is one example, man is one, ayu is one. All these are, we call the asma' mubhama. كذاك من وما تفيدني معا كل عموم يا أخي فاسمعا. So he's mentioning these different types of obscure words that's indicative of generalization. So if you read them in the Quran, then that would be the first assumption. And then he goes on and he says, وَلَفْظُ أَيْنَ وَهْوَ لِلْمَكَانِ كَذَامَةَ الْمَوْضُوعُ لِلزَّمَانِ. And the word ain, where or wherever, meaning so whatever, whoever, wherever you are, Allah can see you, right? So wherever, general, wherever you may be, in the bathroom, on the beach, under the water, under the ground, in the outer space, wherever, right? Aina, ainama, all of those fall in the same category. They're form of obscure nouns for the location. So, and the word ain, where, for the location, and likewise mata, when or whenever, that is used for time, right? So whenever, mata jitta akramtuka, whenever, when you come, I'll show you hospitality, I'll honor you. وَلَفْظُ لَا فِي النَّكِرَاتِ ثُمَّ مَا فِي لَفْظِ مَنْ أَتَى بِهَا مُسْتَفْهِمًا. And the word la in indefinite nouns, then ma used by someone posing a question. وَالنَّكِرَاتِ فِي سِيَاقِ النَّفْيِ تُعْطِي الْعُمُومَ أَوْ سِيَاقِ النَّهْيِ. So النَّكِرَةِ فِي سِيَاقِ النَّفْيِ. Right, so for instance, we call it la nafiya lil-jins. So for instance, when I say, and for example, la rajula fi dar, there's no man in the house. It means there's not a single man in the house. Right, no one's there. Right, not a single man. Or if I did la ilaha illallah, we call it la, the la that negates the genus. Right, there's no God, meaning at all. Illallah, except for Allah. So the first negates the possibility of there being anyone, any in existence. So la ilaha illallah. So we find an expression like that. وَمَا مِنْكُم مِّنْ أَحَدٍ, right? وَلَوْلَا فَضْلُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ وَرَحْمَتُهُ مَا زَكَى مِنْكُم مِّنْ أَحَدٍ أَبَدًا. Right? Had it not been for the bounty of God and His mercy upon you, مَا زَكَى مِنْكُم مِّنْ أَحَدٍ أَحَدًا. مَا زَكَى مِنْكُم مِّنْ أَحَدٍ. So this abada. So here, this is so even la and ma, both of them together, when they come in the context of a negation, right, followed by an indefinite noun, right, la rajula, la ilaha, indefinite nouns, ma zaka minkum min ahadin, right, abada, means that it negates every single, right, so not a single one of you, without exception, would have received purification or forgiveness, right, had it not been for Allah's bounty and His mercy. Right. So those are some of those examples of those expressions. So we have the noun which is preceded by the definite article, be it singular or plural. Then we have the obscure nouns or obscure words like ma, waman, ayu, aina, mata. And then we have la and nakira, la nafiya lil-jins. And also the same thing if we talk about prohibitions as well, when they come with followed by indefinite nouns as well. ثم العموم أبطلت دعواه في فعل بل I'm sorry. ثم العموم أبطلت دعواه في الفعل بل وما جرى مجراه. However, the general force is invalidated through the occurrence of certain types of acts and whatever fulfills the same function. Or that what's fundamentally what this means, because like Imam al-Juwayni, what he said umumu min sifat al-nutq, that generalizations, a generalization is among the characteristics of expressions. Is not the characteristics or applied to actions. So for instance, if we find in a hadith that says that the Prophet ﷺ, he combined between Dhuhr and Asr fi safar, during travel, right? So here we have a word as-safar with a definite article, alif lam at the beginning of it, and it is in the singular sense during travel. So he combined between Dhuhr and Asr during travel, right? And travel here, okay, does it mean a long journey, a short journey, right? So fundamentally what this final verse means is that we can't claim umum or generality when it pertains to an action of the Prophet ﷺ. We can claim it regarding a statement that he made, but not concerning an action to the point that we can say that it's okay to shorten your prayer if you walk half a mile, right? Because some people say, well, this is a journey for me. It's hard, right? So, or a mile. I mean, there's this opinion that the Zahiri, in the Zahiri school, the literalist school, that it's defunct, but this opinion about 1 mile, you can shorten your prayer, or you join in between your prayers, combine your prayers. And I actually know people when I was growing up who actually used to do this. I go from one part of because I'm from Philadelphia, so I live on and I'm in West Philadelphia, and then I'm in North Philadelphia, and the guy, he's traveling to West Philadelphia, and so he combines his prayers on his way home. And so he bases it on what he's understanding from this defunct school. Of course, it's based upon a faulty interpretation. We would say, but the Zahiris weren't just sort of, they didn't. It wasn't a rational judgment that they were making in this particular regard. And the last thing I'll say before I open up for question is that umum is something all of the sects of Islam accept the authority of, because in some regards, umum or generalizations or generalities in the Quran is a form of analogy, what we call, some call a linguistic analogy. Now, in the early period after the death of the Prophet, and once the different theological schools started to develop and the different schools of jurisprudence started to develop, that the Shia in particular were against qiyas. They were opposed to a legal analogy. They said that no, there's no validity to it. The Sunnis were those who were upholding the authority of qiyas. And so the Shia, they objected to it because they say, well, the Imam is alive on earth. And so the Imam is the inheritor of the prophetic light. Not that the person was a prophet, but rather the Imam, there are 12 Imams in particular, according to that school, the 12 Imams, that they were those who inherited the prophetic light. So their interpretation of the Quran, it accords with the divine will, and there could be no acceptable interpretation in the presence of the Imam, right? And so the Sunnis, they didn't accept Shi'i theology or belief on this particular issue, or at least the proto-Sunnis of the early period. So they said, well, we have to still adopt or appropriate, well, not appropriate, we have to accommodate new situations, or according to Islamic teaching, that we have to interpret or expand the application of certain of the teachings of Islam, so it doesn't become a dead religion. And so qiyas, legal analogy, became an important tool in that regard, in the tool of ijtihad. And so the Sunnis, I mean, the Shiites were against it. The Zahiri school, they were against it as well. But they did accept the linguistic analogy, which is umum, because this is just from the language. This is not a rational analogy, because in the rational analogy, this is the one that the Sunnis, they had, we're going to talk about this later, that they pretty much supported the idea of rational analogy, which included, or pretty much it would assume that if I'm going to attach the ruling of one particular thing with another, that they have to share in the, we call the illah, the ratio legis, or the justification for its permissibility or its unlawfulness. So for instance, in making certain types of drugs unlawful, they were being analogized with khamr, for instance, and so if they're producing, if the effect of the of those drugs is the same as that as khamr, or even worse, then it will be made unlawful, not because this is a liquid and that's a liquid, rather because they both have the same effect, of causing inebriation, among other things. So this is something which is accepted in all of our different sects of Islam, the idea of the concept of generalizations, and the Quran is replete with them. قَالَتُ الْيَهُودُ يَدُ اللَّهِ مَغْلُولَةٌ. The Jews said, right? That's in the Quran. You find that, the people from this group, they said this, and but does it mean all of them, all the Jews said that? No, they didn't. قَالَتُ الْيَهُودُ عُزَيْرُ ibn Allah. That the Jews said that Uzair or Ezra is the son of God, right? Do they say no? It was a group of them. Yes, a group of them did say that, right? So it's in the Quran. So when we come across them, we shouldn't feel uneasy, get shocked. It's like, well, just understand the different types of generalizations that do exist. So with that, I'll open up the floor to any questions that you may have, and hopefully I'll be able to read some of these that are written down. Forgot my glasses. I'm farsighted. All right, so this first question, someone online would like to know which chapter and line. Oh, I'm sorry. I should have answered this a long time ago. I didn't realize what it said. I thought it was just like a question, So, yeah, where we're doing, we just finished, this is a Bab al-Am, the chapter on generalizations, chapter concerning the general, and that's on page 21 and 22 from Dr. Hatton's translation. So I hope that you were able to get caught up before now. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Mhm. Mhm. Right, right. I mean, the question. I mean, for the for the benefit of the people who are online viewing, it pertains to the issue of generalizations about men being better than women. And one student he brought up made mention of a hadith, which is a very popular hadith, which states that the Prophet ﷺ had said that that if he were to order anyone to prostrate to another, then he would order a woman to prostrate to her husband out of the greatness of the right he has over her. I mean, first and foremost, the hadith, the scholars they differ about the authenticity of it. But even presuming the authenticity of the hadith, that saying that someone has a particular right over another itself is not a proof that the person who is expected to obey the other or to be feel indebted to the other is of lesser value in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or that the person's worth with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is less. It's just that, again, as I mentioned before, that there is this idea of hierarchy, that hierarchy does exist, that we acknowledge it. Historical Islam acknowledges hierarchy. But a social hierarchy, it should not be confused with spiritual hierarchy. And this is what one of the problems that we get. Again, it's like, and this is a problem that happened with Muslims as well, Muslim scholars historically. That I'll be the first to tell you that the scholars weren't as politically correct as we are today when it came to a lot of issues, especially with regard to matters women, traditional scholars. I mean, you find it even some very recent exegetes, one particular exegete had mentioned, he said "Dhukura kamal," that manliness or maleness is perfection, wa unutha naqsan, and femaleness is imperfection. And so this is an individual, an exegete, famous exegete of the 20th century, who actually said that. And so there is some problems there. So again, when we start talking about generalizations on the level of the mufrad, of the individual level of definition, right, that is usually not so much of the problem, but it's always on that second level of, like, again, because I notice, again, it's like you're interpreting the spiritual realm on the basis of the material realm. So it's like, so look, Allah made me stronger physically, right? Gave us these offices that we run the world, and they don't, right? That has to be a sign that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala he loves us more, right? I mean, that's the somewhat of a natural type of assumption that a person would make who's not really concerned with, of course, with the weaker party, naturally, because of course everybody wants privilege, you see, and so when you have privilege, it's hard for you to see often what you're doing, to those who are lesser privileged than you do, and but that is a misinterpretation to me. I feel like that's a gross misinterpretation, that a mistake, that many of our scholars have made in this regard historically, to make that judgment, to take that extra step, especially when the Quran is very clear about, in akramakum indallahi atqakum, that the most noble of you in the sight of Allah is the one who is the most God conscious, and the woman can be more God conscious than men, and it's not this idea that men are just naturally more God conscious than women are. I mean, so there are all these issues that arise. So in brief, in summary, I would just say, I'm quite sure that probably another question related to this will come up, but for now, I'll just say that that there's a difference between acknowledging one's social position over another, and that being interpreted as God's sort of a sign of Allah's love. I mean, we have like the what do you call it? The what is it? Social gospel. The sort of this idea of what is it? Is a term Christians use. This idea, some of the Christians, they say, like, if you're rich, it's a sign God loves you. If you're poor, it's a sign that You'd have him begin. It's prosperity gospel. That's the word. Yeah, it's prosperity gospel. And it's, we don't have that. Or we shouldn't. We're not supposed to have it. You see. But that in itself becomes like a form of prosperity gospel. So if I have all of these positions in society, if I'm famous and she's not, right? And this happens with men as well. Some people are like, he's more famous. It has to be a sign that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right, has accepted that person. This other person not famous. It has to be, it's not necessarily the case. It's not necessarily true, because often what can happen is just that, okay, this person had more, more support, right? Financial support, economic support, more political support, right, than these other people. It doesn't necessarily mean to be translated as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves this person more than you love the other person. We shouldn't have this idea of a prosperity gospel. I think it destroys us. It's destroyed us as a community, and we have to really stop trying to paint this picture that we can trust every single thing that we hear from our scholars as well historically. So there are things to be critiqued about classical opinion as well. Mm-hmm. 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 No. Yeah, definitely. I mean, in the Islamic tradition, that there is in the social context, that clearly that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has preferred, has favored men over women in the social context, and that but again, being in the office, or being responsible, or being in a position of authority, I guess you would say, should not be interpreted as a sign of grace, but as a sign of responsibility, that Allah gives people responsibility on the basis of their capacity that He's given to them to fulfill certain tasks, that we complete one another. Al-Rijalu shaqa'iqu and Nisa'u shaqa'iqu al-Rijal. That women are the complementary halves of men, as the Prophet ﷺ said. And so if Allah has made one species stronger physically, right, than the other, then the stronger should help the weaker. Right? It's a position of responsibility. It only makes sense. You see, but it's just that when it goes further than that, we say, okay, well, He made me stronger. He didn't make me, so it gotta be. And that's where there's a lot of trouble. The trouble begins is there when it's that second level of generalizations, when we start to make these value judgments. And so that's where it becomes very dangerous. You see. I mean, it can be dangerous on the first level as well, on the level of like the definition. It can be dangerous there, because if we misdefine, and this happens in race issues as well. It's like race, black person, white person, who's defining who? I mean, black person is not the same in every society, right? In every country. What it means to be black is not the same everywhere. What it means to be white or other, it doesn't mean the same everywhere. You see, so on that level of definitions, and we start talking about race relations, right? I mean, what does that really mean? Someone over here had a question. One of the sisters. Please, sisters, open up. Open up. I mean, you can ask me anything. You can challenge me. Don't feel like it's not going to be disrespectful. I mean, if I'm open. I'm just, I want you all to feel comfortable. Yes, please. Alaikum salam. Mhm. 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 All right. Right. So the question was, we speak about Allah being Halim, which is usually translated the forbearant. But then also, the question is, how do we make the distinction between Al-Rahmaan, Al-Rahim, and Halim, those three names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Halim, or forbearance, the idea of forbearance is, or let's say when someone is forbearant, fundamentally what it means is that one is not rattled or sort of made to lose their composure under criticism, for instance. Like, for instance, I mean, there are people, you see in these movies, and people like, I'm mad at you, God. I hate you. You see movies like that, and people they're, thinking as if like it really hurts God. And Allah, and they, and if you're real, then strike me down right now. It's like, it's Allah's Halim. You see, you're a little like you're a child. Always with Allah, you're always gonna be like a child. So Allah is Halim. He takes offense. He's patient with offense. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Ar-Rahman is one of the special names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like it's one of the it's the name where there are certain names that you can, certain names of Allah, and you can actually, a person can take on those names to themselves, and that's my son. In the indefinite form, a person can actually be called Rahim or Basir, Samir without the alif lam, without the definite article. But no one can ever be called Rahman with or without the definite article. You have to be called Abdul Ar-Rahman. Abdur Rahman. And so in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that, called on Allah, call on Ar-Rahman, ayyaman tad'uhu falahu asma'ul husna, that call Allah or call him Ar-Rahman, whichever one you happen to choose, he has the most beautiful of all names. So it's one of his specific names. Quddus is another. You can't call yourself Quddus. It has to be Abdul Quddus or Amatul Quddus. So Ar-Rahman typically is, in the exegetes, they say that the difference between Ar-Rahman and Rahim is that Ar-Rahman is the one who is compassionate and shows mercy to everyone, believer, non-believer, that all the creation, they receive the manifestation of Ar-Rahman, right? The Rahim is a special type of mercy which is given to the believers. وَكَانَ بِالْمُؤْمِنِينَ رَحِيمًا. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that particular mercy which will be manifested to the believers on the day of resurrection. So both of them mean compassionate, merciful, except that Ar-Rahman is much broader. Right? It is more inclusive. And Rahim is more exclusive of the mercy. So does that make sense? All right. Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? Any questions online? Oh, right, mashallah. I like that. It means that I gave a good class, inshallah. Anyone else? I see you're itching. Madiha. Istighraq. Yeah, the alif lam, you have the alif lam of istighraq, the definite article of istighraq jins for all inclusiveness. Like in innal insana lafi khusr, verily man, or verily the human is in loss, the person is in loss. That alif lam is for istighraq al-jins. Then we have the alif lam of al-ahd, or al-ahdiyah, which is for familiarity. So I may mention that, ar-rajulu darabani, the man, he hit me. Right? And this particular alif lam is not for umum, it's not for generalizations. The man hit me. Which man? We know which man we're talking about. The guy who just ran out the door. Ar-rajulu darabani, the man who hit me. So that would be that type of alif lam as well. What else was another you mentioned? Huh? Istighraq al-jins al-ahd. There may be another. It's not coming to me at the moment. But those are definitely the two most standard. Good. Everybody's tired enough? Everybody's tired now? Clear enough? Want to take a break? Okay. Alhamdulillah. All right. That's great. And as long as there are no more questions online, we'll be concluding a little bit early today. And hopefully there was some benefit taken from that. Hopefully it wasn't too philosophical. But I don't think I was. It looked like everyone was, was here with me. Everyone's here with me. And now, yes. Okay. Right, the last one was the la of absolute negation. La nakirat. النكرة في سياق النفي والنهي. So the indefinite indefinite words which is mentioned in the context of negation or prohibition. So that would be the last of the four. So the first one was words that begin with Al-Halim in the singular form or in the plural form. And then the second were the obscure nouns or obscure particles like ma, like whatever, whenever, whichever, among others. And then you have the last one is the indefinite noun, which is mentioned in the context of a negation or prohibition. All right. Good enough? Great. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحابته أجمعين وسبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك وسبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين آمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.